The first time someone told me I was imagining things, it was my husband. He smiled, touched my shoulder, and said the words every spouse hopes they'll never hear. Emily, I think you're just exhausted. First, I believed him. 3 months later, a judge was preparing to decide whether I was mentally competent to manage my own life. And the woman hired to convince everyone I was losing my mind was sitting outside the courtroom, ready to tell the truth. 8 months earlier, my life had been wonderfully ordinary. My name is Emily Lawson. I'm 38 years old. I own a small interior design studio in Boston. Not the glamorous kind you see on television. I specialize in restoring historic homes, old libraries, Victorian houses, family-owned bed and breakfasts. I've always believed beautiful spaces help people heal. Maybe that's why what happened next hurt so much. The one place that stopped feeling safe was my own home. I met my husband, Nathan, at an architecture conference 12 years earlier. He wasn't an architect. He worked in commercial real estate development. We spent an hour arguing over whether old buildings should be restored or replaced. He smiled. I think you're impossible. And I think you're wrong. He laughed. I should probably buy you dinner. You probably should. That argument became our first date. Nathan was charming, patient, thoughtful. He remembered birthdays, sent flowers to my mother every Mother's Day, never forgot anniversaries. Whenever friends asked how we'd stayed so happy after 10 years of marriage, I joked. He still laughs at my terrible jokes. He'd answer, they're getting worse. We were the couple everyone assumed would last forever, including me. 6 months before everything changed, my mother passed away after a long battle with pancreatic cancer. Losing her felt like losing my compass. She had raised me alone, worked 2 jobs, built a small commercial property investment business one building at a time. She wasn't wealthy in the billionaire sense, but she'd spent 40 years making careful investments. Before she died, she squeezed my hand and whispered, "Don't let anyone convince you that you aren't stronger than you think." At the time, I believed she was talking about grief. I later realized she was preparing me for something much bigger. After the funeral, my mother's attorney called me to review her estate. She'd left me her downtown commercial building, 3 fully leased storefronts, 2 office suites, and complete ownership through a family trust. The income from that property was more than enough to guarantee financial security for the rest of my life. Nathan hugged me after the meeting. Your mom would be proud. I hope so. We'll take good care of everything. Those words sounded loving. Looking back, I hear them differently now. About a month later, little things started happening. I'd leave my reading glasses on the kitchen counter. The next morning, they'd be inside the refrigerator. I'd laugh. How did I do that? Nathan would smile. You've been distracted lately. I guess. Then my car keys disappeared. 3 days later, I found them inside a shoebox in the guest bedroom closet. Nathan chuckled. You're working too hard. Maybe I was. Grief does strange things to people. I didn't question it. Then one afternoon, I met a client for lunch downtown. Halfway through the meal, she smiled politely. I'm glad you're feeling better. I frowned. What do you mean? She looked surprised. Nathan said you've been struggling since your mom passed. He mentioned you're forgetting appointments. I stared at her. I haven't missed any appointments. Oh. She looked embarrassed. I'm sorry. I must have misunderstood. But she hadn't misunderstood. Someone had told her that. The strange conversations kept happening. A supplier asked whether I was sleeping better. A neighbor wondered if my new medication was helping. My cousin called to check whether I still remembered our dinner plans. Every conversation carried the same quiet implication. Emily isn't herself. Emily is having a difficult time. Emily forgets things. I asked Nathan about it. He sighed. They're worried. Because of what? You've been under a lot of stress. I haven't forgotten anything. He smiled gently. I know. But maybe you don't always realize it. That sentence stayed with me all night. Maybe you don't always realize it. About 2 weeks later, I walked into my design studio and found every client sample book missing. Fabric catalogs, wood finishes, paint selections, everything. My assistant Carla looked confused. I thought you took them home. I didn't. We searched the office for almost an hour. Nothing. That evening I came home frustrated. Nathan was making dinner. You look upset. Someone moved all my sample books. He looked at me for several seconds, then quietly asked, Emily, did you check your office storage room? We don't have one. He smiled sympathetically. You've always called the basement your storage room. I stared at him. No, I haven't. The next morning, I unlocked the basement door. Every single sample book was stacked neatly on the shelves, exactly as though they'd always been there. I stood frozen. I had searched that basement myself the previous day. Twice. I knew I had. Didn't I? For the first time in my life, I started questioning my own memory. Not because I wanted to, because everything around me seemed to suggest I should. One Friday evening, Nathan came home carrying flowers. I've been thinking. About what? I think you should talk to someone. What do you mean? A counselor. Maybe even someone who specializes in grief. I smiled. That's actually not a bad idea. He looked relieved. I already found someone. I blinked. You already did? Her name is Ava. She's wonderful. She helps families going through difficult transitions. I frowned. How did you find her? A recommendation. The answer sounded perfectly reasonable. Everything always sounded reasonable. The following Monday afternoon, there was a knock at my front door. When I opened it, a woman in her early 30s smiled warmly. She had kind eyes, professional clothes, a leather portfolio tucked beneath one arm. Hi, I'm Ava. Nathan said today would be a good time to stop by. I looked at her confused. I thought we were meeting later this week. She smiled gently. Oh. He said you might forget. For just a second, the room seemed to spin around me. Forget? I had never spoken to this woman before, so how could she possibly know what I might remember? As she stepped inside my home, I had no idea she wasn't a licensed therapist. She wasn't a medical professional. She wasn't there to help me recover from grief. She was an actress, paid to play a role. And before this story was over, she would become the person who destroyed the lie she'd been hired to protect. Ava had a warm smile, the kind that immediately made people feel comfortable. She wasn't dressed like a doctor. No white coat, no clipboard filled with medical forms. Just a simple navy sweater, comfortable slacks, and a notebook. She looked more like a friendly neighbor than a healthcare professional. She extended her hand. It's nice to finally meet you. I hesitated. I'm sorry. I thought we were meeting later this week. She smiled sympathetically. Nathan mentioned your schedule has been difficult lately. That sentence bothered me. Not because of what she said, because she believed it. Someone had already convinced her there was something wrong with me. Nathan walked in from the kitchen carrying coffee. I'm glad you two finally met. He looked at Ava. Thank you for coming. My pleasure. Then he turned toward me. I'll give you two some privacy. As soon as he left the room, Ava opened her notebook. I know this might feel uncomfortable. It does. She nodded. That's completely normal. I looked at her carefully. Can I ask you something? Of course. What exactly did Nathan tell you? She smiled politely. Only that you've been under an incredible amount of stress since losing your mother. That you've become forgetful. And that he wanted extra support for you. None of that sounded unreasonable. Just wasn't true. For the next hour we talked about my mother, my childhood, my work, my marriage. Nothing about the conversation felt manipulative. In fact, I actually liked Ava. She listened without interrupting, asked thoughtful questions, never judged me. When she left, she smiled warmly. I think we'll get along just fine. So do I. As the front door closed, Nathan looked at me hopefully. Well, I like her. He smiled. I'm glad. Looking back, I think he smiled because the first part of his plan had worked. Over the next several weeks, Ava visited twice a week. Sometimes we'd have coffee. Sometimes we'd go for walks. Sometimes she'd simply sit with me while I worked on design sketches. She never acted like a therapist, more like a companion. One afternoon she asked, Have you misplaced anything recently? I laughed. My reading glasses. My keys. A couple of sample books. She quietly wrote something in her notebook, then looked back at me. How did that make you feel? I shrugged. Frustrated. Embarrassed. She nodded thoughtfully. What if I told you that's becoming more frequent? I frowned. What do you mean? Nathan has been keeping notes. I stared at her. Notes. She opened her folder. Inside was a handwritten journal. Every page listed dates, times, descriptions. Emily forgot lunch. Emily couldn't remember a conversation. Emily misplaced important documents. Emily seemed confused after grocery shopping. I looked up. I don't remember any of this. Ava smiled gently. Sometimes people don't. That night I confronted Nathan. Why are you keeping records about me? He looked surprised. Ava showed you? Yes. He sighed. I didn't want to. But after your mom passed, I started getting worried. I'm not losing my memory. I know you don't think you are. That sentence landed like a punch. Not because it was cruel, because it sounded compassionate. It made me question myself. Again, the strange incidents became more frequent. I'd write appointments in my planner. The next morning, the pages were blank. Important client contracts disappeared from my desk, only to reappear days later inside kitchen drawers. One afternoon I drove to a client's home. When I arrived, she looked confused. Emily, our appointment is tomorrow. I checked my calendar. It clearly said Thursday. Except, it was Wednesday. Had I really made that mistake? Or had someone changed the date? For the first time in my professional life, I apologized for something I wasn't sure I'd done. My assistant Carla eventually noticed. You've seemed distracted lately. I know. Is everything okay? I smiled weakly. I think so. You think? I looked away. I'm honestly not sure anymore. Those words terrified me. Not because someone else believed I was changing, because I had started believing it too. One Friday evening, Nathan invited two close friends over for dinner. Halfway through the meal, I walked into the kitchen to refill everyone's drinks. When I returned, the conversation stopped. Almost instantly, I looked around the table. What were you talking about? Nathan smiled. Nothing important. His friend Michael quickly changed the subject. But I noticed something. The sympathy in their eyes. Later that night, I quietly asked Nathan, were you discussing me? He hesitated. They asked how you've been. And I told them you've had a difficult few months. I crossed my arms. Did you also tell them I'm forgetting things? He didn't answer immediately. I was asking for advice. So now our friends think I'm mentally unstable? They're worried because they care. No, they're worried because of what you've told them. The following Tuesday, Ava arrived carrying a small gift bag. I brought you something. Inside was a leather journal. I thought writing things down might help. I smiled politely. Thank you. She looked genuinely kind. You don't have to be embarrassed. Lots of people experience memory problems after trauma. I slowly closed the journal. I don't think that's what's happening. She tilted her head. What do you think is happening? For several seconds I couldn't answer, because I honestly didn't know anymore. That afternoon, while Ava stepped outside to take a phone call, she accidentally left her notebook on the coffee table. I wasn't trying to invade her privacy. I simply noticed my own name written across one page. Curiosity got the better of me. I opened it. Most of the notes looked ordinary. Then one sentence caught my attention. Continue reinforcing memory uncertainty. I frowned. Reinforcing? Not observing. Not documenting. Reinforcing. Before I could read another word, Ava walked back inside. Our eyes met. She immediately realized I'd seen the notebook. She smiled. But this time, something about that smile looked forced. She quietly picked up the notebook and slipped it into her bag. I should probably head home. I nodded. Probably. As the front door closed behind her, I stood alone in my living room replaying those 4 words over and over. Continue reinforcing memory uncertainty. For the first time, a small voice inside me whispered something I hadn't dared consider before. Maybe I wasn't losing my mind. Maybe someone wanted me to believe I was. And before the truth finally came to light, the woman hired to convince me I was crazy would discover something even more disturbing than I had. She would discover exactly who had written those instructions. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those 4 words. Continue reinforcing memory uncertainty. They didn't sound like the notes of someone trying to help me. They sounded like directions. Instructions. A plan. By morning, I had stopped asking myself one question. Am I losing my memory? Instead, I started asking a different one. Who wants me to believe I am? The next afternoon, Ava arrived exactly at 2 o'clock. She smiled as she always did. How are you feeling today? I looked directly at her. I have a question. Okay. Who wrote the notes in your notebook? For the first time since we'd met, she looked uncomfortable. They're just professional reminders. No, they're instructions. Her smile faded. I think you're misunderstanding. I gently interrupted. Ava, I've spent 15 years building a business. I negotiate contracts every week. I read people for a living. I know when someone is lying because they're uncomfortable. Silence. Then she quietly looked away. I should go. She gathered her bag and left much earlier than usual. Watching her drive away, I realized something important. She hadn't defended the notes. She'd avoided them. The following morning, I installed new security cameras. Not because I wanted to spy on anyone, because I wanted answers. The cameras covered the front entrance, the kitchen, my home office, and the hallway leading toward the bedrooms. Nathan noticed them immediately. What's all this? I've had equipment disappearing. I thought it was time. He forced a smile. That's probably a good idea. For just a second, I thought I saw disappointment in his eyes. 3 days later, I found exactly what I needed. I returned home from meeting a client around lunchtime. Nathan believed I wouldn't be back until evening. As I quietly walked toward my office, I heard voices. One belonged to Nathan. The other belonged to Ava. I stopped outside the partially closed door. Nathan sounded irritated. She's starting to question everything. Ava answered quietly. I don't think this is right. You said she was dangerous. You told me she had episodes. Nathan lowered his voice. She does. No. Ava answered firmly. She doesn't. I've spent 6 weeks with her. She's organized. Calm. Consistent. She remembers everything. The room became silent. Then Nathan spoke again. You've already been paid. I know. But this isn't what you told me. You said she needed emotional support. You never said you wanted me to convince everyone she was mentally incompetent. I felt my heart pounding. Mentally incompetent. There it was. The truth. I quietly backed away before either of them noticed me. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone. Instead of confronting them, I drove directly to my attorney. Rebecca Lawson listened without interrupting. When I finished, she asked one question. Did your security cameras record anything yet? I haven't checked. She smiled. Let's check. For the next 4 hours we reviewed every recording. Most showed ordinary days. Deliveries. Neighbors. Mail carriers. Then, Rebecca paused the video. There. Nathan entered my home office while I was meeting a client. He opened my planner. Erased appointments. Changed dates. Removed documents from my desk. Then calmly walked into the kitchen. Moments later, he placed my car keys inside a cereal container. Another recording showed him carrying my reading glasses upstairs. Another showed him removing design samples from my office. Every strange thing I blamed on myself had been created by him. I stared at the screen. I wasn't imagining any of it. Rebecca reached across the table and squeezed my hand. No, you weren't. The next morning, Rebecca contacted a private investigator. Within a week, he uncovered financial records connected to Nathan. The discovery explained everything. 2 months after my mother died, Nathan had quietly met with an attorney specializing in conservatorship. He had drafted paperwork months before I ever misplaced my first set of keys. The application claimed I was becoming unable to manage my finances, unable to operate my business, unable to make legal decisions. For proof, Nathan would gain authority over my estate, the commercial building, my trust, my investment accounts, everything. Rebecca slowly closed the file. This was never about grief. It was always about control. Meanwhile, Ava stopped answering Nathan's calls. Then one Friday afternoon, she appeared outside Rebecca's office. She looked exhausted. She held a flash drive in one hand. I need to tell someone the truth. Rebecca invited her inside. For nearly 3 hours, Ava described everything. Nathan had contacted her through a casting website, not a medical agency. He advertised for an actress capable of portraying a compassionate care coordinator. He told her his wife was emotionally unstable after losing her mother. He wanted someone to earn my trust while quietly documenting behavior that could support a future conservatorship. First, she believed she was helping a frightened husband. Then she met me. Nothing matched Nathan's stories. I wasn't aggressive. I wasn't delusional. I wasn't confused. The only confusion she ever witnessed was the confusion Nathan deliberately created. Then she placed the flash drive on Rebecca's desk. What's on this? My conversations with Nathan. Rebecca looked surprised. You recorded him? Ava nodded. After I realized something was wrong. He admitted he was moving Emily's belongings. He admitted he wanted everyone to believe she couldn't manage her own affairs. He even rehearsed conversations with me before every visit. Silence filled the room. Then Ava looked at me. I'm so sorry. Tears filled her eyes. I thought I was helping someone. I never wanted to hurt you. I reached across the table and gently took her hand. You stopped. That's what matters now. She cried openly. I'll testify. If the court needs me, I'll tell them everything. Rebecca smiled for the first time all afternoon. I think the judge is going to want to hear exactly what you have to say. For months, Nathan had carefully built a story designed to convince everyone that I was losing my grip on reality. He never imagined the person he'd hired to sell that story would become the witness who destroyed it. And in less than 2 weeks, we would all meet in court. The courthouse was already crowded when Rebecca and I arrived. I wasn't nervous. I was disappointed. Not because my marriage was ending, because the man I trusted for 12 years had turned my grief into a business plan. As we walked through security, Rebecca looked at me. How are you feeling? I smiled. For the first time in months. I trust my own mind. That's enough. She nodded. It is. Nathan was already sitting beside his attorney when we entered the courtroom. He looked calm, confident, almost relieved. He believed the conservatorship hearing would end exactly as he had planned. His attorney organized several medical reports on the table. Counseling notes, behavior journals, witness statements from friends who believed I had become forgetful. Every document painted the same picture. A grieving woman slowly losing the ability to manage her own affairs. The judge entered. Everyone stood. After reviewing the filings, she looked toward Nathan's attorney. You may begin. Nathan's attorney spoke first. He described my mother's death, the emotional stress, the misplaced belongings, the forgotten appointments, the growing concern shared by family and friends. Then he held up Ava's notebook. Our client sought compassionate support. He hired a care coordinator because he loved his wife. He simply wants to protect her. I looked at Nathan. He avoided my eyes. Rebecca stood. Your Honor, we agree this case is about protection, but not in the way opposing counsel suggests. She connected a laptop to the courtroom monitor. I'd like to introduce security footage from Mrs. Lawson's residence. The judge nodded. The first video appeared on the screen. Nathan entered my home office while I was meeting a client. He opened my planner, changed appointment dates, removed documents. The courtroom remained silent. The second clip showed him placing my reading glasses inside a kitchen cabinet. The third showed him hiding my car keys. The fourth showed him carrying design sample books into the basement. Every unexplained incident, every moment I'd questioned myself, played one after another. Nathan's attorney slowly lowered his pen. Rebecca spoke calmly. Mrs. Lawson wasn't forgetting these items. They were being moved. She displayed timestamps, calendar records, client emails. Everything matched perfectly. The evidence wasn't emotional. It was factual. Then Rebecca called her next witness. Ava Collins. Nathan's head snapped toward the courtroom doors. Ava walked in quietly. She looked nervous, but determined. After taking the oath, Rebecca asked, "Miss Collins, how did you meet Mr. Lawson?" "He contacted me through a casting website." The courtroom became completely silent. "Did he tell you he was hiring you as an actress?" "Yes." "What role were you asked to play?" "A compassionate care coordinator." "Did he tell you Mrs. Lawson had been diagnosed with any mental illness?" "No." "He said she was unstable after her mother's death." Rebecca nodded. "What happened after you spent time with Mrs. Lawson?" Ava looked directly at me. I realized she wasn't confused. She wasn't delusional. She wasn't dangerous. She was grieving. And someone was trying to convince her she couldn't trust herself. Nathan slowly closed his eyes. Rebecca placed a flash drive into the courtroom computer. "I'd like to play a recorded conversation." The judge approved. Nathan's voice filled the room. "Move her planner again. If she starts questioning herself, don't reassure her. Just ask whether she's sure she remembers correctly." Another recording played. "Once the conservatorship is approved, everything transfers under my management." The final recording was only one sentence. "She'll never realize what's happening until it's too late." No one spoke. The silence was overwhelming. The judge removed her glasses, then looked directly at Nathan. "Mr. Lawson, do you dispute the authenticity of these recordings?" His attorney quietly whispered something. Nathan looked toward the table, then answered, "No, Your Honor." The judge nodded once. "I appreciate your honesty. It would have been better offered months ago." The conservatorship petition was immediately dismissed. The judge found that the evidence demonstrated a deliberate effort to manipulate Mrs. Lawson's perception of reality, rather than protect her well-being. She ordered that the recordings and supporting financial evidence be referred to the appropriate authorities for further investigation into potential fraud and related offenses. Then she turned toward me. "Mrs. Lawson, the court finds you fully capable of managing your personal and financial affairs." I smiled. "Thank you, Your Honor." It wasn't a victory. It was my life being handed back to me. Outside the courthouse, Nathan caught up with me. "Emily." I stopped. He looked nothing like the confident man who had entered court that morning. "I don't expect forgiveness." "No. I suppose you don't." Tears filled his eyes. "I kept telling myself I was protecting our future." I gently shook my head. "No. You were protecting your access to my future." He looked down. "I don't know when I became this person." I answered honestly. "Neither do I." He swallowed hard. "I loved you. I believe that. But somewhere along the way, you started loving control more." He nodded slowly. "I think you're right." Those were the last words we ever spoke. 6 months later, life looked completely different. My design studio was thriving. The commercial building my mother had left me had been fully restored. Instead of raising the rent, I converted one vacant office into a free business resource center for women starting small companies. The ribbon-cutting ceremony was simple. No reporters, no television cameras, just local business owners, neighbors, friends. As I cut the ribbon, I thought about my mother. She had always believed success meant leaving something better than you found it. I hoped she would have been proud. One afternoon, I received a handwritten letter. The return address belonged to Ava. Inside was a single page. "Thank you for showing me that telling the truth is always worth the risk. Because of you, I left acting and went back to school. I'm studying psychology now. This time, I want to help people for real." I smiled as I folded the letter. Sometimes the right decision changes more than one life. People often ask me what the hardest part of the experience was. They expect me to say the courtroom, or the betrayal, or losing my marriage. They're always surprised by my answer. The hardest part was doubting my own mind. When someone you love repeatedly tells you that your memories are wrong, you begin wondering whether you can trust yourself. That's why the greatest moment in that courtroom wasn't when Nathan admitted the truth. It wasn't when the judge ruled in my favor. It was the moment I realized I had been right all along. I wasn't forgetful. I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't losing my grip on reality. Someone else was trying to rewrite it. And once the truth finally had a chance to speak, it didn't need anger. It didn't need revenge. It simply needed evidence. Because lies can survive for a surprisingly long time, but they almost always collapse the moment they collide with the truth.